Following program is produced by Project Bait and does not reflect the views of this station.
This is Mark Wells, and this is part one of the Wells Report on the global African presence for My People. Although Black History Month is celebrated in the month of February, and by the time this piece airs, February will have already passed, I would still like to highlight the work of an important historian who has been documenting worldwide Black history for a number of years. The man's name is Runoko Rashidi, and for those of you who haven't heard of him, I encourage you to learn more about him. Every year, Rashidi travels the world and leads tour groups of his followers to various countries in search of the global African presence and the African foundations of world civilizations. Now, whether you're familiar with Rashidi's work or you've never heard of him, his photos and experiences are sure to astonish anyone who is interested in knowing more about people in general throughout the world, or for people who have an interest in specifically the African diaspora. I've been fascinated with the world beyond U.S. borders and peoples of African ancestry for a number of years, so I felt I needed to introduce Rashidi's work to our viewers who may have never heard of him. In an interview with Rashidi during his February visit to Detroit, I asked him how long had he been traveling the world documenting what he calls a global African presence.
I started, I think back in 1978. I went to Mexico. I went in search of the Olmec, and that really got me started. In the 1980s, I started to travel to, I think I went to India for the first time in 1987, Brazil in 1987. Around that, just after that, I started traveling to Central America, to Belize, to Costa Rica, and then I started going to Kemet. I started going to Egypt. In 1997, I moved to San Antonio, and San Antonio is a relatively cheap place and a very boring place, I might add. And so then I began to travel almost non-stop. And in the last 12 years or so, I'm not sure if I've ever completely unpacked a suitcase.
Any lecture by Runoko Rashidi will feature a number of photos, sculptures, and paintings that he has either taken himself or discovered on his travels. And after viewing some of these photos, one is sure to get a different perspective of peoples throughout the world, particularly those of darker skin. Now, traditionally, the average person would not think of Black or African descendant people in places like India, the Fiji Islands, or the Philippines. But a look at some of Rashidi's photos will make you think twice about the African diaspora and the origins of man, ancient civilizations, and world exploration. Rashidi went on to tell me that he's been traveling and documenting a global African presence since about 1978, which made me wonder exactly how many countries had he visited up to this point, to which he said,
I visited 96 countries. I visited 95 countries in the last 12 years. I went to Mexico that first trip, and then I went to Mexico again around 1984, but I haven't been back since. So in the last dozen years or so, I've been to 95 countries. Now I'm trying to get to 100 within the next few months.
Now, because most of us have been educated from a European perspective, some of our questions about certain types of people may never have been answered or even considered. Taking this into consideration, I wanted to know what triggered Rashidi's desire to learn more about the global African presence.
It came largely as a result of reading Destruction of Black Civilizations by Chancellor Williams, and then reading the work of one of his disciples, a man named LeGrand Clay. LeGrand, who a lot of people don't know, did a lot of pioneering work on the global African presence, and especially, even before Van Sertima, the African presence in ancient Mexico. So I was intrigued when I found out that African people had a history before slavery and had traveled around the world without shackles and chains, and I wanted to find out what happened to them. So it's really from reading Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams and his disciple LeGrand Clay.
As Rashidi said, works by people like Chancellor Williams, and I would add Cheikh Anta Diop, are important for people to read to learn more about the history of African peoples, starting before the transatlantic slave trade. These types of books will surely make one question the possibility of a connection between Africa and peoples in other parts of the world. Now, because most of us have been educated from a Eurocentric perspective, some of our questions about certain types of people may never have been answered or even considered. For instance, have you ever noted the physical appearances of the peoples of the Papua New Guinea Islands? These people are located in Oceania and inhabit the eastern portion of an island in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, just north of Australia. Although they have dark brown skin and tightly coiled hair, DNA studies tell us that these people are genetically very distant from the peoples of Africa. The same holds true of the Negrito people of southern Asia. In Spanish, the term Negrito means little black, and these people can be found in places like Thailand, the Philippines, and the Andaman Islands, which are located in the vicinity of India and Burma. Negritos are short in stature and also possess the dark skin and hair texture generally associated with Africans or peoples of African descent. But closer genetic analysis shows that the Negritos are more similar to the peoples of Asia than the peoples of Africa. The Negrito people are of special interest to historians and geneticists because they are one of the world's most isolated populations, and no one can give a definitive answer for the origins of the Negritos. While some studies theorize that Negritos are ancestors of the peoples of New Guinea, anthropologist Jared Diamond hints that Negritos may also be related to Australian Aborigines and predate the arrival of Mongoloid peoples who later entered Southeast Asia. Although these studies show the Negritos to be very different genetically from African populations, other tests have also shown that they are possibly descendants of an early migration out of Eastern Africa more than 50,000 years ago. Now, pondering the origins of the Negritos leads to a further and deeper discussion that brings into question the existence and origins of the peoples of Australia, India, the Fiji Islands, and other regions of the world. I will explore this topic more and continue my conversation with Runoko Rashidi in part 2 of this Wales report on the global African presence for My People.